Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the next in our Export Skills Program series of webinars. And today, it's an exciting day because we kick off the first in our webinars in Module 5, which of course is our International Business Rules / Doing Business module. So thank you all for joining us for number 1, first cab off the rank, which appropriately for our part of the world is doing business in China. I'm Collins Rex. I'm a director with the Global Trade Professionals Alliance, and the GTPA is an organization that cultivates international standards within the industry. Our aim is to create a trade environment that is both inclusive and trusted by all. And the GTPA has partnered with Global Victoria and Agriculture Victoria's Pathways to Export program to deliver this comprehensive export skills program. Of course, as always, the address you see on the screen will take you to the registration page for all of the sessions still to come. And we have several still to come across the program, including all the sessions in today's module. So today's module consists of 3 webinars, today, next week, and then we have another one a couple of weeks later, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that towards the end of today's session. So as I mentioned, Global Victoria has partnered with Pathways to Export to deliver this particular module, which focuses on international business rules and doing business. The Pathways to Export program is a $5 million 4-year initiative by Agriculture Victoria, which aims to support small-scale, niche and emerging agri-food businesses to develop export capability and assist existing exporters expand into new markets. The program provides tailored one-on-one support, and it includes a range of bespoke business services, including access to international market specialists, fundamental export tools, and the establishment of a consolidated one-stop shop export hub, which incorporates market intelligence and interactive resources to support trade success. And the address you see on your screen will take you directly to the Pathways to Export page. As always, I can make today's slide deck available to you if you drop me an email at the end of the session. So all of these URLs you will obviously get in that deck. So it's a 4-year program, creates pathways for Victorian agri-food businesses, tailored one-on-one support to new exporters, complements Global Victoria's programs, events and missions. It's funded the Vic House Food and Fibre Pavilion, and you'll hear more about that later. It covers emerging categories, citing strong global growth, has an in-market specialist network in 23 global offices, and provides practical services for new exporters. Just a note on the screen regarding the disclaimer for today. Bear in mind that all information is of a general nature. You need to make sure that everything is applicable to your own business before you apply it, because all business are very different. And of course, as always, today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available at the end of the Export Skills program. So I mentioned that I'm Collins Rex. I'll be your presenter for today. And as always, it is a delight to have the presence of your company. I begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, which for me is the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples who might be joining us online today. So we've got a lot of ground to cover today. Let's get straight into it, and let's talk about doing business in China. So as you can see, several areas we're going to cover today. It is going to be a full program, so strap yourselves in, folks, because you're in for one heck of a ride. Starting off with market update, and then we're going to get a very special agribusiness update from David Chu, who is our in-market specialist in China. Market opportunities in China, doing business in China, covering the key areas of which you need to be aware. We're also going to look in the most basic way possible at setting up a business in China, the steps involved in doing that. And finally today, a quick guide on the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement, chapter, quick guide, followed by questions and answers. And as always, feel free to type any questions in the chat box and we'll take them throughout or cover them off at the end. So a quick market update on China. China's annual growth rate has moderated. As we know, it went gangbusters for several years, but it does remain high compared with OECD countries. China's GDP is forecast to grow by around 5.7% per annum until around 2025. And by some estimates, their total GDP will overtake the United States, which is the largest in the world, by around 2028. Of course, it's going to be very interesting to observe any fallout from the COVID pandemic in China and what effect that has on GDP. China is the largest partner for more than 120 nations. It has surpassed the USA as the European Union's largest trading partner, for example. The value of China's global exports is 2.72 trillion US dollars, with imports valued at around 2.36 trillion US dollars, which means, of course, China imports a lot of stuff. Consumer spending in China is predicted to more than double in the next 10 years, and you can see the figure there. Its consumer market is also expected to reach $9.6 trillion and account for 47% of GDP, up from 30% of GDP currently. Key growth drivers in the China market. China has a skilled workforce, which of course lends itself to all manner of services and manufacturing activities. There is enormous investment in infrastructure in China, and it's not just the Belt and Road scheme. There are any number of infrastructure projects coming into being every single day in China, and that in itself creates a number of opportunities for Australian companies. It's an innovative society. It certainly leads the way in many technologies. It is an early adopter of technology, and it does use technology to very good effect. And digitization is starting to occur at a really fast rate in China, China being one of the most digitized nations very shortly. Now, on that note, I'm delighted to move into our agribusiness update segment, and I'm going to introduce you to our speaker for today, who is David Chu. David is the Senior Agricultural Manager from the State Government of Victoria, based in Beijing. Davis was born in Shanghai in China, but he spent much of his life growing up in Melbourne and embracing all that Victoria has to offer. Professionally, Davis has developed his career across both private and public sectors, having intricate Chinese and Australian employment experiences. Most recently, and prior to joining Agriculture Victoria, Davis worked with Beijing Chunbo, an e-commerce fresh food company, similar to Alibaba's Hema Fresh. Davis's core responsibilities included the global purchase and importation of fresh fruit, meat, alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages, with an additional key focus being embassy and supplier relationship management. In other words, he knows his stuff, and not just in traditional cross-border trade, but also in e-commerce. Now based in Beijing, Davis is the in-market specialist for Agriculture Victoria, and his export is on government relationship, market entry policy, and trade facilitation. Please join me in welcoming Davis.
Thank you, Collins. Hi, everyone. My name is Davis, and I'm the Agri Victoria's in-market specialist. I'm based in Beijing, the political heart of China, and I think it's an ideal place to follow all the changes in this market. And today I will be talking about some very recent regulatory and consumer changes in China that will be affecting everyone who is or will be exporting agri-food products to China. Then I will talk about what I, as a market specialist and the Victoria government trade and investment team in China, can offer to agribusiness in the market. Now, first I will turn off the video just to improve my bandwidth. And okay, well, thank you for the slide. Okay, so one of the first thing we need to talk about is the most recent custom regulation changes. It's called Decree 248-249. It was introduced by the General Administration of Customs China, which is the national head agency that administrates all customs in China. And they have issued this two decree, 248, 249. The new decrees updates the rules and regulations for import and export of food into China. Now, those two new decrees have come into effect on the 1st of January this year. So that means it is happening right now. The decree's aim is really to register and administer all food production and processing companies that plan or is currently exporting to China. Chinese customs is now shifting the burden of regulatory foreign business to their respective national governments. And it will tighten up the unregulated food importation into China. Furthermore, I think the Chinese customs is intended to hold foreign regulatory agencies and business accountable for any breach of food safety issues from their nations. And they are willing to issue import bans for country or region that they deem unsafe. Now, this is really, personally, I think it's a sign of maturity for the Chinese market. The other emerging markets are also doing a very similar thing to what China is doing. For example, the UAE is introducing new labeling requirement, and Indonesia is following through with new labeling rules as well. So you can see there's a global trend happening right now for the emerging markets, a shift towards a more regulated trading environment to protect the safety of consumers. Now, to register with the Chinese customs, agribusiness need to know which category they belong to. Now, the decree itself actually divide all food production companies into two types. We call it the types, the Article 7 group and the Article 9 group. Now, if your business falls under the Article 7, what you're doing is you really are producing, you're really producing products such as meat, dairy, seafood, grains, edible oils, nuts, and health food. So for the category Article 7 business, you need to contact the Federal Department of Agriculture because only they can recommend and nominate business to the Chinese customs. The Chinese customs does not accept direct individual applications. However, if you're producing products such as wines, confectioneries, and any of those pre-packaged processed food, then you all belong to Article 9 group. Now, for the Article 9 group companies, you really can actually apply for yourself. So you just need to go to the Chinese customs website, and or you can do it yourself, or you can do it with the agent, and you can submit the application. Fortunately, it is in English, so it is very beneficial for English-speaking countries such as us. So that is one of the advantages. And that is the most recent regulatory changes in China. Now, next slide, please. Yep, thank you. I'm sure you have all heard about the current logistic issues around the world. Like many parts of the world, the transporting goods to China is slowing and the cost is rising. I think the main reason is that for China, they are practicing a zero COVID policy. That means that if there's one case of COVID case in any workplaces, the government will try to contain and quarantine the whole area. Now, this often means that one person affected, the whole area will be disinfected, and they will shut down for 14 days. So whenever there's a port workers catch a COVID through international goods, and then the whole port will be placed on the quarantines, and no goods can be moved in and out of area. That's what happened in 2021. However, in 2022, there's a lot of improvements in the working practice at the Chinese ports. That means they are now able to process those products safely and more speedily. And the disinfecting process still require a very lengthy time, up to 14 days really. But now we didn't see much of the cases that we've seen into 2021, where there's a large port closures. Only one that we know currently is having some difficulty is Shanghai, which is also very fast approving. The news just come out today says that the port in Shanghai will open in the 1st of June. So that's a good news for all the traders. Now, next page, please. Now, due to the zero COVID measure in China, people are turning towards online shopping more and more. Everything from electric goods to fresh foods. Coupled with rollout of the 5G network in China, penetration of online e-commerce is much further than the pre-COVID level. Now, furthermore, there's new models of e-commerce appearing in China. For example, live stream sales of food product and community bulk purchasing. Now, I want to explain this a bit here. Maybe we probably have a concept of live streaming food sales. It's like TV sales, but the difference in China is it's really everyday individuals, not a company that's actually doing those live streaming. They are actually just doing their daily cook shows and using products they buy from supermarkets. And it's trying to, well, it have more authentic feelings to the Chinese consumer. So it's very much appreciated by the people who's actually stuck at home whenever there is a COVID shutdown. And also there's nothing community bulk buying is because most of Chinese people are living in those tall high rises. So that means your whole building, whenever it's shut down or it's been quarantined or for whatever reason has been restricted due to the COVID, a lot of people actually can't go out and shopping. So what happened now is, people will just band together and to buy in bulk because now there's often discounts and sales for large quantity of purchasing. So there is a development of a community bulk purchasing developing in China to facilitate people who is trapped or stuck wherever they are. So that is a very interesting trend currently. And also because of COVID, people in China is turning more and more towards health food and healthier lifestyle over fast food or the 996 lifestyle. Now, the 996 lifestyle means, you work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and working for 6 days, which is quite normal in China previously. And after COVID, however, there's a much change in the Chinese working habits, and people are more prefer to work at home and more family orientated. So there is a shift in the the working habits in China, and therefore it leads to a different outlook for their lifestyles and therefore their food choices they are making while they're purchasing the products. So healthy food with healthy benefits such as improving heart, low sugar, low salt is very much the new trend developing in China right now. Next slide, please. So as myself in-country specialist, what I offer services really is talk about market intel, as I was speaking before about the Chinese market, and also how to link up with the Chinese buyers. I think that is one of the major role I play. Also, as you know, because it's based in Beijing, it's a very much a political city. So there's very much of regulatory updates whenever there is a change in the China's regulation, and this is available because now the companies can act in a timely fashion to prevent any financial losses with any changes to the current laws. Also, I am providing timely updates to all the ports. I'm actually monitoring almost all the major ports and airports around China and issuing warnings whenever there is a case of closure or delayed due to COVID situation. So that is my role in China. Next slide, please. Also, the VGTI team in China, along with Agri-Victoria, is actually offering this a new initiative called the Vic House. So Vic House is a Agri-Victoria funded project that is basically a 3-story showroom that is based in Shanghai. And next page. So in this facility, we are really providing Victorian agribusiness a chance to use the facility for whatever reason. For example, in the first floor, we have spaces where you can conduct online and offline meetings with a business partner or new Chinese buyers. Next page. On the second floor, it's a display area where we have over 90 companies actually showcasing their products. Now, I want to emphasize here that this display center is not open to public. It is invite only, and all or any agribusiness participating in this project can invite anyone who they want to come and have a look at their products. Also, next page. It's the event space. And so what that means is, if a company who's based in China want to run any lunch, any invitation dinners for their VIP buyers, partners, they can do it here. And we also have a kitchen so they have ability to demonstrate their food directly, physically at the place. So this allows business to showcase their product in a very timely manner. So we can have products and we can have chefs in China, and the business can be in Australia and live streaming directly into the event. So that kind of, is especially important in the current situation where traveling is very much restricted. Next page. As you can see, we already have several events and promotions being launched. For example, the Topa fruit lunch with Summerstone Fruit Australia, and also the opening event with the Minister of Agriculture. And we have invited Chinese businesses to kind of how to put it to examine and to try some of the Victorian products that is being showcased in our facility. So this is what the Victorian government trade and investment team is offering in China. And whenever there is, if you feel like you want to participate, just contact me. I'll show you to the right direction with the right application. Oh, by the way, all this is actually free. Now, if you want to hire any staff, then if there's cost, but the facility itself is completely free. And yeah, that is what we're offering. Next page. Well, thank you for everyone. And if you have any questions regarding any things that we mentioned, please email me. I'll be happy to answer any questions. And I'll get back to you, Collins. Thank you.
Thanks, Davis. That was fascinating. And I think it's such an amazing opportunity for Victorian companies to be showcased in China. So if you have any questions, you can obviously see Davis's address on the screen, or you can drop me a line at the end of the session. You'll see my email address as well. And Davis is going to stay with us today. So if you have any questions for him, either over the course of today's presentation or at the end, please feel free to type those into the chat box. And of course, we'll take them as they come through. So thanks very much, Davis. And let's forge on. As I said, we've got a lot of ground to cover today. So be with us in for the full race. And let's start by looking at some of those more specific market opportunities in China for Victorian companies. So looking from a general perspective, resources remain the backbone of Australia's exports to China, particularly iron ore and energy bulk commodities like LNG and coal. China is a top market for Australian exports of meat, wine, wool, fruit, nuts, seafood, grains, and dairy. And the Australian government has also in recent times been working to resolve a number of impediments to trade, which of course have impacted very seriously barley, meat, and a few other exports, particularly in agriculture. And just to recap, China imposed anti-dumping and countervailing tariffs of 80.5% on Australian barley in May 2020, and it is also investigating alleged dumping and illegal subsidisation of Australian wine, and those disputes are ongoing. The continued growth of e-commerce platforms and preferential cross-border e-commerce policies have also created loads of new channels for Australian exporters, and traditionally Australian exporters do really well when it comes to marketing opportunities like Singles Day. Cold chain logistics capacity continues to grow beyond the first tier into second and third tier markets, and this creates opportunities for premium Australian fresh produce and food product exports. Services exports in education and tourism made up an increasing share of Australia's total trade with China before the closure of international borders due to COVID-19. And you can see, for example, that in 2019, 203,000 Chinese students were studying in Australia, and this is slowly but surely starting to normalise. An aging population, rising incomes, and capacity shortages in China's healthcare sector create huge opportunities for Australian businesses across the supply chain. And this includes areas like aged care, clinical trials, digital health, medtech, and medical services. Australian fintech and blockchain firms are also beginning to make connections in China, capitalising on both the gradual opening of China's financial services sector to foreign firms and the disruption to the sector caused by the digital economy revolution. Now, some specific areas in agribusiness: lots of opportunities to develop long-term supply agreements and build relationship with Chinese enterprises. And this is across the entire agribusiness and food value chain. And this includes things like animal feed and nutrition, supply of genetic material and breeding cattle for beef, design and management of meat processing facilities, environmental management, which is a very important one and one in which Australia plays a potentially important role, agriculture and veterinary chemical facilities. And some more sorts of things that you might want to think about, things like byproduct utilization and disposal, veterinary and biosecurity services, tracking traceability, aquaculture, dryland cropping efficiency, and something in which Victoria really excels, sorting and processing equipment and software. And the little image you see there is of a cherry sorting machine manufactured by GP Graders. In the food and beverage space, China, of course, is the world's second largest buyer of imported food and beverages after the US. And although consumption patterns do vary depending on region, age, and income group, consumers across China are attracted to products that offer food safety and high quality. And Australia, and particularly Victorian exporters, certainly tick those boxes. Superior taste, better nutrition and other functional benefits, high quality packaging, superior freshness, and convenience. Buyers of packaged foods in major cities also demonstrate a strong preference for well-known and established brands that are readily available in Australia. So the key here is that you need to maximize your Australian branding and your Australian market, because if you are well accepted in Australia, there's a very good chance you will be well accepted in China, because you will be known and trusted. Some more opportunities, and we don't need to go through them piece by piece, but you can see that they incorporate a number of different areas. And of course, in the case of barley at the moment, even though it is an opportunity, it is subject to those incredibly high tariffs while that dispute is being dealt with. Also things like chilled and frozen meat, which is limited to red meat. So just bear that in mind. There's currently no protocol in place for white meat and game meat. So if you're in the chicken game, or indeed in the game, you can't export those to China because there is no protocol in place. Processed foods, wine, beer, fruit juice, etc. So now that you have a sense of some of the opportunities, and that is really just scratching the surface of the opportunities for Victorian companies in China, let's look a little bit more at doing business with and in China. Some China quick facts. We don't need to go through those bit by bit, but important to note that yes, there is a very large population, 1.418 billion people. The proviso that you need to take away from this, though, is that not every single one of those people is potentially your customer. So always take that into account when you look at the numbers that can be quite staggering in China. And if you look at the map, you can also get a sense of the fact that China is a really large country, and you cannot look at China as one market. China is many different markets that all just happen to be in one country. So you need to be looking at the context of China and of each individual city, each individual province of China when you are making your business decisions. Again, we don't need to go through these, but you will get a sense of just the sheer size of China and the individual Chinese cities. Now, before you start doing business with China, you have to make informed decisions. The first thing that you do need to consider is that the current trade environment includes large sections of China still being subject to some form of COVID-19 lockdown or restriction. And the image you see there is one that you may already have seen because it was circulating quite widely on the internet a couple of weeks ago. That is the port of Shanghai, and those are vessels in the port of Shanghai, which will give you an idea that movement in and out of that particular port is probably going to be a little bit slow at the moment. You also need to take into account your resources and your experience. The Chinese market, like any foreign market, is not easy in which to do business. You need to understand that you're going to take some time to establish yourself, and you need to have the necessary resources and international business experience before you decide to tackle China head on. You have to have time to commit to this. It's not going to be a quick fix. You need to be in it for the long haul if you're going to be really successful in the Chinese market, and you need to have the resources to underpin that time commitment. Also understand what the product standards are in the market. You can't just sell anything into China. And if you can sell it in Australia, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can sell it into China. There might not be protocols, and we've already mentioned the example of white and game meat. There are other standards that have to be met before you can sell into China, and you need to be aware of what those are, or you could be in trouble from a business perspective. You also need to take into account the credibility of any potential business partners, distributors, and associates. You need to do your homework. You also need to pick your location carefully. China has many different regions, as you saw on the map. Each of those regions has its unique economic and social characteristics. Big cities, of course, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, are good starting points, but major business centers are not the only options. Maybe those first, second, third tier cities and markets are not the ones for you. Maybe you need to be looking at the smaller niche markets until you've at least established a foothold in the market. Also choose your destination considering transportation and logistical needs that your products might have. Your product type, the demand for your product, and the government regulations that could apply to your product. This can vary from city to city and province to province. So you need to understand that what you can sell in one part of the country, you may not be able to sell in another. And that applies not just to physical goods, but also to services. And of course, there could just be a much larger demand in some parts of the country than others. So pick your battles. There is no better way than visiting the market. Of course, we understand that at the moment, that is not practical. It's not really a possibility, but things will normalize. And when they do, you really do need to get on a plane and you need to go over there and have a look at China. Also find help in country. The Victorian government representatives in China, and you already now have a wonderful contact in Davis, but there are other members of the Victorian government that can assist you on the ground in China. And you can also, of course, get assistance from our national agencies, Austrade, and from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Also consider fostering relationships with regional agents or distributors who can help you to keep track of policy and regulation updates, help you to collect market data, to respond to changes, and can also help you break down those institutional, language, and cultural barriers. Now, some of the specific things that I want you to think about when you think about doing business in China, and we'll start off with intellectual property. China is a signatory to most major international IP agreements, and it has a legislative framework that is broadly in line with international norms. Just a few things to note. China operates a first-to-file system, meaning that the first person to register, for example, a trademark in China becomes the legal owner of that mark. Consequently, one of the most common IP risks is trademark squatting. So if an Australian company finds that this has happened, there are options available to recover your brand, but these are often lengthy and expensive, and there's no guarantee of success. So China, being a first-to-file system, is completely different from Australia, which is a first-to-use system. And just because you've registered your intellectual property, including your trademark, in Australia, does not mean it is protected in any other country in the world, and that includes China. You need to specifically register your marks there. If you are considering manufacturing in or exporting to China, register your trademarks in both English and Chinese as early as possible, before you've even dipped a toe in the market. Also consider registering transliterations of trademarks. The more you've protected, the more you will have going into the future. You might also want to think about patent protection if you have an invention that you have patented in Australia and you intend to introduce that patented invention into the Chinese market. Now moving on to taxation. In 2006, the Ministry of Finance introduced a set of accounting standards for business enterprises, and this is largely based on international financial reporting standards, so that China was brought more in line with the world. Consequently, since 2007, all listed companies are required to comply with the ASBEs, and other enterprises are encouraged to apply the ASBEs. So if you are able to comply when you are accounting for your business in China, your life will be made much easier. Now, just some points of taxation to note. The corporate income tax rate is 25%, the branch tax rate is 25%, and there's a capital gains tax rate, which is also 25%, and the basis of that is worldwide. We don't need to go through all the other line items. Just notice that there is double taxation relief available, and the tax year is a calendar year. There are various withholding taxes, including dividends, interest, royalties, and branch remittances, which don't occur in most of the occasions. There are also things like social security contributions, real estate tax, deed tax, VAT, consumption tax, etc. Now, the reason I bring this up is so that you are forewarned and you make sure that you're completely prepared when you are fixing a price in the market. You need to understand how many taxes and duties, etc., can accrue to your product, and how that fundamentally affects the actual price that the consumer pays, and where that challenges your positioning in the Chinese market. Also understand that as a business, if you are conducting business in China, you need to be aware of all the different levels of taxation. And this is really just the start. Depending on the city that you're in and the province you're in, that changes as well, and more layers of taxation can accrue. Moving on to the legal system, the Chinese legal environment is very complex. Many aspects of local laws, enforcement, and penalties are totally different from those in Australia. The court system comprises of country-level basic people's courts, which hear small civil and criminal matters in the first instance, and it goes all the way through to the Supreme People's Court, which is the highest court of appeal in China, much like our highest court of appeal in Australia is also the Supreme Court. If you do find yourself in a commercial dispute position, you really do need to look at ways in which to resolve it that do not involve going to court. It's best to start low-key and slowly and only escalate if necessary. Clarify the problem, move to direct negotiation, then on to mediation, arbitration, and finally, if you have to, enforcement and litigation, but do try to avoid that. It's costly, time-consuming. It may cost you more to battle the case than it will that you lost if you didn't. Some notes on recruitment. If you are intending to employ people in China, foreign companies cannot hire Chinese citizens directly. The process of obtaining working permits is complex. It varies from region to region. China's contract employment system also makes it difficult for employers to dismiss employees in China. So be very sure that you want to go down the path of employing people in China, and be very sure that the people you employ are the right people. There's also a great shortage of talent in China simply because talent is snapped up. And this is particularly marked in areas like marketing, sales, technology, professional services, etc. There's no shortage of people. There are just more opportunities than there are people. Retention is a challenge because talent is in short supply. It means that talented people can and do move quickly and often. Fringe benefits are an important part of the Chinese remuneration system, and this can be up to 40 to 65% of the total compensation that you need to pay. And there are any number of other issues of which you need to be aware. So be forewarned. If you are going to employ staff in China, get yourself professional help. You need to consider the market entry strategy that you employ in China. There are any number of ways in which you could enter the market. Bear in mind that agents and distributors often specialize in one region or one end user. So if you're using somebody who ably represents you in Shanghai, they may not be so great in Guangzhou. A company that sells grading equipment to China's agricultural industry, for example, may not have good channels into the seafood sector for seafood grading. A growing number of foreign agents and distributors have established themselves in China. And through complex subcontracting networks, foreign distributors can work directly with traditional retailers. So you can very well be able to find somebody who speaks your language, who can represent you. And remember, we have that wonderful resource at our disposal, the Victorian government offices overseas, including Agriculture Victoria's advisors, who can give you a lot of information on how best to approach this. China's consumer market is fragmented by geography, by income levels and age, so that should help to inform your market entry strategy. A strategy that focuses on a niche or a specific region might be the best approach for a smaller company until you've got a foothold. Also remember that government officials play an oversized role in the Chinese economy. So you need to understand how your product or service is regulated and by which agency. And of course, e-commerce is a large and growing sales channel into China. And not just B2C, which of course is the channel that we're all familiar with, but growingly B2B. So do bear that in mind as well. It may be a softer entry level for you. Logistics presents certain issues in China simply because of its vast land mass. It has a huge volume of domestic and international trade, and as a result, moving things around can be complicated. China is linked by over 74,000 kilometers of major highways. It has 16 major ports, 91,000 plus kilometers of railways, and more than 500 airports. Considering how large the country is, that is not nearly enough. The last mile often presents the greatest logistics challenge You've got to take that into account in any fulfillment model that you consider for the Chinese market. And remember, your last mile for your customer is even more important than the first. One way that many companies are implementing successful warehouse solutions in China is, of course, by outsourcing to a 3PL logistics provider. There are many really professional businesses that you can use to help you on the ground in China. Just pointing out again that ongoing COVID restrictions do present enormous challenges to the movement of freight into and out of China, particularly at the moment in Shanghai, but it also has knock-on effects to the cost of freight. Risk management, just as any international business that you embark on, needs to be taken into account in China. Some of the risks that you need to think about: commercial fraud, breaches of contract, intellectual property infringement and theft, bullying, intimidation, threats to physical safety, restrictions on movement, and criminal charges for engaging in activities that may not constitute crimes under Australian law. All of this means you need to do your homework. And I know I keep coming back to that, but ultimately the better prepared you are, the less chance there is that you will be in trouble. And the truth is, it's no different for a Chinese person coming into Australia to do business. They too could find themselves subject to all of the things that we've just touched on, because they might not be aware of how different Australia is from China. So please try to understand as much as you possibly can about your business, your product, how you can and cannot trade it in China before you start your journey. There are, of course, other ways to mitigate risk. Seek professional legal advice. Far better to pay a lawyer at the front of your journey than at the back of your journey. If you do it up front, chances are you will be doing the right thing from day one. Get those due diligence checks done on all your potential business partners, and be aware of local business practices and be sensitive towards them. Not everybody does business in the same way that we do in Australia. Be aware of any local laws relating to business activity, and this includes where you conduct business. Just recently, I heard of the case where an Australian company was in a great deal of trouble because they set up an office in what was a strictly residential area, which was breaking the law, and they didn't realize it. The fines were hefty and they were potentially in a world of pain. Also, if you are a Chinese Australian doing business in China, it's best to travel on your Australian passport if you want the assistance and the protection of our Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Moving on now to how you actually set up a business in China. So if you've decided, once you've considered all the potential market entry strategies, that what you really want to do is set up an operation in China, then there are a few steps that you have to put in place before you can start trading. Now, we can't go into these in any enormous amount of detail, but you do need to be aware of the process. Also, just to give you another sort of heads up, today's session is obviously a lot of information in a short space of time, but I will also be making available in the next few weeks a more comprehensive document that will be available to everyone that has attended this webinar that will give you a lot more information. So understand that you have more than one option for a local presence in China. Your Chinese presence may be in the form of a wholly owned foreign enterprise, and we've all heard of the WOFE. It could be a contractual joint venture. It can be an equity joint venture. It might be a representative office or a local representation by a third party. And this could be a local secretary or a representation service company, or it could be through a distributor. You need to understand the implications of all of those different business models. Every one of them will have implications from a regulatory perspective, from a taxation perspective, from an accounting perspective, etc. You also need to very carefully define your business scope for your China presence. The China National Development and Reform Commission may prohibit, restrict, permit, or encourage your business setup based on your business categorization and scope. Now, the address that you see on your screen will take you directly to the horse's mouth, so to speak. On this site, you will be able to see all of those businesses that are restricted, all those businesses that are forbidden, etc. Familiarize yourself with the scope of your business and be accurate when you describe it in China. In Australia, we give kind of vague notices to what our business is all about when we register our business name in the first instance. And then when we go down the track and we report to ASIC, it cannot be vague in China. Also, select the right location for your Chinese operation. China abandoned its preferential tax rate for investments of foreign companies way back in 2008, but there are some areas that offer local preferential policies for foreign investors. So this could make a real difference to your bottom line. And this includes land leasing, procurement, staff recruitment, and all sorts of other preferential treatments. Also bear in mind that certain activities are restricted in specific locations, so don't fall foul of the law. You need to confirm the minimum registered capital for your China operation. The Chinese government requires certain minimum registered capital for various types of businesses. Local industry and commerce administrations may decide your minimum registered capital based on their judgment of your business scope and operation scale. So depending on how you have described your business, a different value may be ascribed to it from the one that you have ascribed, and you may need to register more capital. You need to confirm with local government agencies the minimum registered capital through local contacts before you take any other actions. Make sure that you do this, make sure that you do it right, and make sure that you understand how much money you are going to have to lodge and have tied up. Also integrate any commercial clauses in the Articles of Association to maximize your profit repatriation into Australia. You may have commercial arrangements between your head office in Australia and your subsidiary in China to guarantee a maximum profit repatriation, but some arrangements must be included as part of the Articles of Association, or else they will not be valid. Get legal advice. Please conduct due diligence and a credit check on any joint venture partners, because your partners may not be what they claim to be. And this is not just in China, this is anywhere else in the world. Get in-country assistance with vetting your potential partners to make sure that they are the people you think they are, that they have the resources they appear to have, etc. And develop a comprehensive local employee management system. It's very difficult to recruit the right staff in a foreign country, and even harder to effectively manage local staff long distance in a foreign country. So you need to know how you're going to manage your staff. You have to encourage engagement, and you have to encourage commitment from your local staff. And this may include reporting and communications policies, training, performance assessment, remuneration, etc. Very important that you know how you are going to manage your people on the ground. And that, in a nutshell, a very quick guide to setting up a business in China. As I say, a lot more detail will be made available to you, and also more than happy to take questions after today's session. So let's now end today's session by looking at the basics of the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement, or as we love to call it, CHAFTA. CHAFTA entered into force on the 20th of December 2015, and the agreement unlocks significant opportunities for Australia in China. If you want to read the full 800+ page text, feel free. You can follow the address on your screen and you can download the entire document. And it is available freely from DFAT, but it is comprehensive. So just some of those benefits under CHAFTA at a glance. So for goods exporters, on full implementation of CHAFTA, and we've got a few years to go to full implementation, almost all of Australia's goods exports to China will enjoy duty-free entry. Now that, of course, comes with the proviso that things can change. And as we've seen in the barley situation, things can change very quickly and they can change quite substantially. But in principle, almost everything will enter China duty-free from a goods perspective at full implementation. CHAFTA provides Australia with an advantage over our major agricultural competitors, and that includes the US, Canada, and the European Union. And it also counters the advantages that Chile and New Zealand have enjoyed through their FTAs with China. So it levels the playing field for Australian agricultural exporters. Also bear in mind that China buys more of our agricultural exports than any other country does. In agriculture, CHAFTA eliminated remaining tariffs on Australian barley and sorghum on the 20th of December 2015. And then, of course, as I said, things change. Barley came back when we had the dispute around dumping and countervailing. So just bear in mind that what works today might be different tomorrow and different again the day after. So you need to be informed. We will, however, see a rapid reduction on other agricultural exports, including seafood, sheep meat, and a variety of horticultural products. You can see the other outcomes there, including dairy, tariffs up to 20% eliminated by 2026. Wine tariffs were eliminated by 2019. And then, of course, we entered into that dumping and subsidization dispute, which is currently ongoing. And you can see some of the other tariffs and quotas there. For services exports, China is Australia's largest services market. In CHAFTA, China offers Australia its best ever services commitments in an FTA, and that is only surpassed by China's agreements with its own territories, Hong Kong and Macau. Most valuably, this includes new or significantly improved market access commitments for Australian banks, insurers, securities and futures companies, law firms and professional services suppliers, education services exporters, health, aged care, construction, manufacturing and telecommunications services. All of those businesses can operate in China. It's particularly marked for things like professional services suppliers and law firms, where Australia has enormous benefits and ability to trade in China compared to any other country in the world. CHAFTA has given us most favoured nation status under the agreement, and this means our competitive position in services into the future will be protected if China extends any more beneficial to other trading partners. So what we have today will remain. If anyone else gets a better deal, ours will be adjusted accordingly. CHAFTA at a glance for investors. CHAFTA improves opportunities for investors in both countries. China's commitments on investment in CHAFTA protect the competitive position of Australian businesses in China into the future. Banking, wealth management are leading sectors of Australian direct investment into China, and that is increasing. Also take note that the investment obligations in CHAFTA can be enforced directly by Australian and Chinese investors. through an investor-state dispute settlement mechanism. And this includes safeguards to protect government's ability to regulate in the public interest and to pursue legitimate and public welfare. Now, in order to obtain the benefits under CHAFTA, Australian exporters have to meet origin requirements. So exporters wishing to claim preferential treatment under CHAFTA must provide either a certificate of origin or a declaration of origin. In order to have a declaration of origin, though, the customs authority of the importing country must have issued an advanced origin ruling. So this means that you need to either get the certificate of origin or get an origin ruling from Chinese customs. Now, what constitutes Australian origin? If the goods were wholly obtained in Australia, if they were produced entirely in Australia, exclusively from Australian materials, or they were manufactured in Australia or China using materials from other sources and meeting CHAFTA's product-specific rules, and non-originating materials must have undergone substantial transformation. If you can tick one of those boxes, you can get your certificate of origin and you get the preferential duty rates under CHAFTA. Now, you don't have to get the preferential duty rates, you don't have to get a certificate of origin, but then of course those rates cannot and will not apply to you. Now, we've managed to cover a huge amount of ground in a really short space of time. I am happy to take any questions now, and if I don't have the answers immediately, more than happy to either refer them to Davis or indeed to take them offline and get back to you. So if there are any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box. And if not, I will give you my email address in a moment, and you are more than welcome to send me any questions after today. And indeed, if you would like a copy of today's deck, then please send me an email too, and I will send today's deck to you. That's my email address. Feel free to use it freely. And also, if you haven't yet registered for our other sessions in this module, and we have 2 sessions coming up next week, same time as today, we're going to be looking at doing business and regulations, etc., in the Middle East, or not the Middle East, rather, in Southeast Asia, with an emphasis on Indonesia. And then on the 27th, and for those of you that had already registered for the Middle East and North Africa session, originally it was scheduled for the 13th of June, but of course that is Queen's birthday, which we did not realize when we scheduled it. So we have moved that session to the 27th of June to 2 p.m., not 12 p.m. And all your registrations, if you've already made them, will be transferred to the new date. Of course, if you haven't yet registered and you were intending to, please note that that is the 27th at 2 p.m. now, no longer the 13th at 12 p.m. And you can go to the address on your screen, the global.vic.gov address, to register for those sessions and all the remaining sessions in the Export Skills program. It doesn't look as if we have any questions. I think I've probably just stunned you into submission with all the information that we've imparted today. So all that remains is to say thank you very much for coming along and for being part of today's session. And Davis, I might just get you to turn your camera on again. And I'm really delighted that you could join us today and that you were able to share all the information that you did. And I think there was some really useful stuff there and some nuggets that hopefully all our participants have squirreled away as well. Looks as if Davis might be having a bit of a problem with his bandwidth and getting his camera on, so don't worry too much, Davis. Thank you so much for attending today's session and for being part of the program, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you online again in the near future. There he is. Thanks, Davis. Thank you so much for being part of us and for being part of this session, taking the time, and for your great slides as well. And I'm sure people will be reaching out to you personally when they start embarking on their journey into China. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I wish you the very best And I think we might just have got a question. Did we quickly get a question? Yes. Thank you, says Herbert. And Poe, yes, there will be a copy of the recording, but that will be made available by Global Victoria at the end of the session. So, and when I say the end of the session, I mean the entire export skills program. So watch your inbox for details as to when that occurs. But I will share today's deck with you if you just drop me an email and remind me that you would like a copy of it. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Go off and do some good business and do business in China. Keep well, everyone. Thanks, Davis. Thanks, everyone, and goodbye.